Hello and welcome to In Conversation. I'm James Campbell, and on today's episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by artist, advocate, and educator, the incredible Sharon Louden. Sharon, it's so great to have you back on the podcast. And of course, we're celebrating the imminent release of your new book with Intellect, The Last Artist Standing, Living and Sustaining a Creative Life Over 50, which is going to be released on April the 21st. It's great to have you on. It's the third time that we've had one of these conversations. And of course, this will be the third book in the series. But before we dive into that, could we just take a moment and just allow you to introduce yourself to our listeners? Who are you? Where are you calling in from? And what's been going on with you, Sharon?
Well, first, I want to say to you how grateful I am for you and for everybody in Intellect. I feel like you're a family to me and my husband, project manager, jazz musician, Vincent Vallega. And I feel that just an honor to be with you today. If people don't know already, James is a very kind and loving and amazing person. So I just want to say thank you. To introduce myself, so I wear multiple hats, which everything is under the umbrella of artist. So I feel that a fierce advocate for my fellow artists and art in general, being an incredible source of longevity, and art and artists give to the well-being of others. And so I don't believe anybody can really argue with that. And my big passion, along with my work, which is really, like I said, tied in together, like the books, the advocacy, the partnerships, and then also we're forming right now in the middle of it a nonprofit that is already fiscally sponsored by Redline, which is a fantastic grassroots organization in Denver called the Institute for Sustained Creativity, to have a place where all professional development that's being taught in various colleges, et cetera, are in one central place. In addition to that, partnerships with like-minded organizations connected to one another, and also the backbone and source of recording and publishing from our books and our book tours and conversations, et cetera, as a database for access for growth for artists. So that's what I believe. I mean, there's a lot of other things I'm into, but for the moment, that's the things I'm doing at the moment.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And if people want to find out a bit more, you have a fantastic website as well, which is just sharonlouden.com. Is that correct?
Thank you.
And yeah, it's a wonderful website with lots of fantastic content, but it also has a rather impressive CV. I know you're going to be modest, but you certainly do really tick boxes as artist, advocate, and educator more than anyone else I've ever worked with. And this is sounding like a bit of a love-in, but like it's not meant to. It is just such a pleasure to be working with you and Vince on yet another book. And each of them has been monumental, both in impact and in reception. So it's a great pleasure, and we're super excited to have this third book on the horizon. Now, I should say people should definitely check out the website because there's so much great info there. But people can also take a look at your own art, and you are a very accomplished artist in your own right. Which I know that your modesty might not allow you to take all the flowers that are thrown your way, but. People can also check out our previous podcast if they want to find out a bit more about your own art practice, which we've talked about, I talked about in a great length in the past. But today, I definitely want to talk about the series and the new book. But of course, we've also got you on during Women's History Month, so we want to bring in some of these, because I know that women's history and women artists and just women in creative culture is such a huge thing for you, and you've been such an advocate for that, as well as artists and people who have been historically disenfranchised, whether it be from the arts or education or other things. So we're going to bring some of that in too, and I'll try and link it together with some thoughtful questions as best I can. But I want to begin with sort of thinking about origins and vision, and what initially inspired you to create the Living and Sustaining a Creative Life series, and how has your vision evolved over time? I'll just very quickly say that Living and Sustaining a Creative Life is a book series which, with your latest book, will be five different books. But within the book series, there's also a trilogy of titles edited by yourself, which you'll be able to bring into this conversation today. And of course, the third part in the trilogy is soon to be released. But we were also very glad on the February 28th, so just last Friday, we were able to publish Artists as Writers, which is with some wonderful editors and has many fantastic contributors, which of course is the second book, only the second book not edited by you, which is within that series. Anyway, I'm rambling on, but we've got 2 new books within the series as a whole this season. One of them is part of your own trilogy of looking at how you live and sustain a creative life, and of course there's this new one with Seth and Stephen, which is looking at artists as writers and looking at writing and how we can all improve our writing and various other issues. Anyway, I will shut up and I'll hand over to you. So tell us a little bit, Sharon, about your origins and vision. How did this series get started, and kind of what's it all about?
Well, it got started a long time ago. I was on moderating a panel on at the College Art Association conference. Gosh, I think I have to say it was like 2011 or 2012, somewhere around there. And Amy, who was from Intellect, who was in the audience. You never know who's ever in the audience when you're speaking to or with a group of people, was in the audience and came up to me afterwards and said, would you be wanting to write a book? And I said, I can't even write an artist statement very well. But she said, what kinds of books do you think are needed? And what do you think is missing out there in the world? And what I found to be missing is really truth and starting conversations about how artists sustain a creative life. That panel itself was titled How to Make a Living with or Without a Gallery. And I think over 400 people, standing room only, were there. And the reason, I believe, is twofold. One, this sort of dependence on an old system that only serves a small percentage of artists all over the world. And then on the other side, the expectations and wanting a silver bullet to resolve issues of worry and financial concern for artists and sustaining their lives. So for me, I feel like there's a lot to debunk there. There is no silver bullet, but that's a really good thing. And I also believe that the professionalism of being an artist has been difficult, and also for a lot of artists, and then I think also losing why we do this in the first place and what our creativity is, because artists are a lot more than makers. And even before we pick up a brush, an instrument, any kind of instrument, pencil, whatever that might be, we lead with our ideas. So what the series for me is really to I feel as though a book is a privilege, and Intellect, and with the University of Chicago Press, has given me this incredible privilege. And when you have a privilege, you must share that. And to be able to give people who may not have a voice or a voice that's being amplified enough, to be able to give them an opportunity to amplify those, and a place, a foundation for amplifying those voices. The Last Artist Standing came about because when I was working at Creative Capital, thanks to Ruby Lerner, and if you have never been to her website, it's chock full of resources. It's rubylerner.com. She is my mentor. She's an amazing person. And I was working with her and Allison Pooh, who both had faith in me enough to be able to have professional development workshops. And they weren't like cookie cutter, like how to do a resume, how to do a statement. It's really nuanced about how to sustain a creative life. and pragmatically, not philosophically. So I'm interested in pragmatic solutions. I'm not interested in a lot of air in philosophy. I do think theory and philosophy are extremely important, but I'm interested in people eating, having means by which they can eat, pay their rent, and live a financially secure life. So what I found is when I was doing these workshops, so many artists over 50 were mostly women were signing up for these workshops. And then just the knowledge, especially in this country, that women, people identify as women over 50, and especially women of color, and those have been marginalized for way too long, become invisible. And in this book, it was extremely important for me to be able to create conversation about how artists do not have retirement. We do not have an automatic financial security. We do not have health insurance. And yet we give to the well-being of others in many, many, many ways. We're also the backbone of freedom of speech and have been for so many years. So that's what this book is doing. And every book is a form of generating conversation for more solutions.
And of course, in terms of the vision evolving over time, you've opened this up to allow other editors the opportunity to focus on their area of expertise. So we now have a book which has already been published, which is looking at artist historians. And then, of course, we just last week published Artists as Writers, looking at writers. And again, slightly different questions, but around those same sort of topics that you've focused on within your own trilogy of books, which is, of course, Living a Sustained Creative Life, The Artist as Culture Producer, and then coming towards the end of April, Last Artist Standing. Killer title as well, which we're all very happy with that one. But you've mentioned a little bit there about diversity, an area that's very much under attack at the moment too. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about diverse perspectives and community. Your books feature voices from a wide range of artists globally. That's very much the truth. And what guided your selection process, and what kinds of diversity, whether in practice, career stage, or background, were you kind of aiming to highlight through your work in this series?
Well, thank you for it's a wonderful question. And people ask me that a lot. It's fairly organic, but the first thing that is very important to me in all of these books, in which I absolutely emphasize with the editors who were selected in the series, and I can talk about how they were selected as well. But for me, the artists that are selected here and in all of the books are generous to other artists. They're good people. They're people who are not narcissistic. They are people who put other people first. They step aside for other people. And that's what I'm doing with this. And that's my obligation too, because of who I am. I have to do that in this short life that we live. And so the people who are selected in this book are varied in their stories. They're from different parts of the country. They're people, some people I've known and some people I haven't known for a long time. There are 3 people, all women, who died during the time that I was editing this book, which was very painful, over 5 years, a very long time. But it really had to do with the pandemic.
Yeah.
When you're talking with people who don't have certainty financially or health-wise in their life, and then there's a first-time pandemic, a book is not something that you are going to be concentrating on. And same with me. I fell and I had a head injury, and then which is fine now, but I was also living a 10-minute walk from Elmhurst Hospital in Jackson Heights, which was one of the busiest hospitals, if not the center of the most fatalities during the pandemic. But through that, I stuck with a lot of the artists in conversation. But I'm extremely sad that Kentika Mann, Valerie Maynard, and Audrey Flack passed during the pandemic, or Audrey did right before, actually, when we handed in the manuscript. So that's the basis for the criteria. The other thing is, for these people I talk with, they have stories that I think everyone can relate to, and that these books are for the general public. They're not just for the art world. And in fact, the art world knows a lot of what's in these books already. They're for people to pick up at a bookstore and learn who artists are today. And reading about people who are over 50 and the kind of resilience that they have and determination, and also courage to be able to express themselves freely, that's automatic and a part of them. Those are some of the few things to take away from this book that other people can not only gain inspiration from, but their pathways are solid pathways to also identify with and lean on in many different fields and professions all over the world.
I think that's a really good point, because I think a general public reading this book will see how much work it is to be an artist, and how much work you have to put into your art, and not necessarily in sustaining your ability to maintain artistic practice, and how difficult that can be. And then, yeah, I think it does illuminate all the benefits that we get from supporting artists at an institutional level, at a systemic level, and individually, whether it be buying from an art fair to support someone directly, or the importance of like the National Endowment of the Arts or various other things globally that support the arts financially or through various other support mechanisms. And I think this book does a really good job of illuminating a lot of the pressures, but also a lot of the the kind of fears and issues that artists face, and also lets people know you're actually getting a lot out of this without maybe consciously being aware of it. So I think that is an important point. Community obviously is an important thing throughout these books as well, and community plays a major role in your work, and that's very clear. But in your experience, what are some of the most effective ways artists can build and sustain supportive networks? Do you have any maybe examples that have come up through the books that you could illuminate?
Absolutely. Thank you, James. I love these questions. They're wonderful. They lean right into the series, which you know so well. I think first to say that humans need validation. This validation is a human need. It is, I just said that, flipped on that, mirrored that, emphasizing how validation is crucial for living. And I believe that artists, since the 1960s, have not received the validation and the importance and the value of the arts, especially in this country, of how incredibly important they are. And in addition, I would just say it's not just that artists give to the well-being of others in various ways, meaning health-wise, and think about people who retire. Where do most people retire? I mean, think about former President Bush. He became a painter. That is just not, that's not unusual. But all the artists that came before him are probably not doing as well as he is. So I believe that it's sort of in a lot of ways like public school teachers, but they actually get a retirement and pension, oftentimes pension and health insurance. But I digress. I would say validation is a source of connecting community. So whether or not validation, we come together as artists because we're not being validated as we should in this country. So we come together naturally, in that what's so wonderful about the art community is that if you say you're an artist, that door opens
Mm.
much quicker and easier than it would be, let's say, another field where you have to prove yourself. And so there's something incredibly beautiful about that kind of acceptance and validation. The pragmatic ways in which people can gather. One reason why, and I'm sure we'll get into this, that my husband and I, Vincent and I, built these incredible conversation tours with you at Intellect and the great help with University of Chicago Press and all the venues that have come together, is that I act as a catalyst to connect venues to venues together through our values, but through these forums that when artists come together, know that they're in a brave space, not just a safe space, because I don't believe there are safe spaces, but a brave space where people can actually speak without that judgment, then and protected and have the roots of the same values. Artists come together and connect with one another. On the tour, I'll never forget going to Ketchikan, Alaska. We went to the public library there. Incredible. I was with Harag Vartanian, Matthew Delegate, and myself, and which were both part of Artists as Cultural Producer. And if you don't know Harag Vartanian, he's the editor-in-chief of Hyperallergic. If you've never even gone to Hyperallergic, I would suggest that you do and sign up for their free newsletter, hyperallergic.com.
Just say it's a fantastic publication.
Absolutely.
And also a big shout out to Harad, because he's again in the artists as writers book as well.
Right.
and has been a supporter of the work. So yeah, great to have him involved in this next project too. Sorry there, Sharon, I interrupted. Over to you.
No,
you're in Alaska.
No, I love that you said that, and I adore him, and he's a wonderful close friend. And Matthew Delegate, who's an artist who ran an artist-run space for 20 years called Minus Space. And so we were there together with Vince, and on the panel, these forums are starting out with just a warm-up of a panel discussion. And then the people who come I ask every artist, what do you need and want? And when those needs and wants go out there, because we have an incredible, fantastic community, we are able to, we're able to come together, trust one another, but also these forums, a lot of them would bring in people, even in as small of a town as Ketchikan, people would not know each other.
Yeah.
Then through that experience, and then we tend to follow up too, they come together. So we can all be catalysts for one another.
Oh, Sharon, thank you for sharing that lovely story about Alaska and developing community. But I think actually this would be a really good point for you to talk a little bit more about the extensive book tours that you've done for this book series, I should say. Now, I know you might not be able to deliver all the details of the forthcoming tour, but maybe very briefly, you could just let us know a few of the places you've been so far, touring these books. And just like, I don't know, yeah, maybe just explain to us a little bit about that process of how you were able to get so many people to commit to hosting you around the world, and then just tell us a little bit about your plans for the next book and what you can share with regard to the forthcoming tour.
Oh, sure. Thank you for that question. I would say the first thing is it started out, sometimes tragedy yields a lot of wonderful positivity. I always believe that, actually. We had a house fire in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and we didn't think we were going on a tour at all. But because we were homeless, I think for 236 days, I started reaching out to friends of mine who were they're artists, but also critics, curators. I actually don't put anyone on a pedestal because they're all human beings and we're all part of the same community. And these people, though, are very dear to me. And I reached out to them and said, can we bring this book and have these town hall forums? And it just ballooned and sort of kept going and snowballed. And over 5 years, we went to 164 places and met over 12,000 people. And thanks to Darren Walker at the Ford Foundation and many other foundations, we were able to really go on the road. And now we are doing it again. We are going to start. I'm not sure yet where to start, because there are so many organizations that want to be a part of this, of which I'm extremely thrilled. I will tell you there are there are 6 sites in North Carolina where we're going, including the McCall Art Center in Charlotte. Is that in Charlotte? I think it is. Forgive me, I've forgotten. I just know North Carolina. We're going to Tracy Morgan Gallery in Asheville. We're also going to the Beacon Artists Union in Hudson Valley. And I gave you those 3 different examples. The venues are very diverse. We're even starting with a pre-book events next week in Florida and Miami at Florida International University. Jennifer Prince is an incredible artist and also head of their graduate program, who was introduced to me by Alpesh Kantilal Patel, who is one of the editors of Storytellers of Art Histories, who was also introduced to me by Harag Vatanian. The reason why I give that string of connectivity is because we all share similar values, and we are connected in that way as a community. And that kind of thread I value and celebrate. We're also going to 4 different places in Tennessee. We're going to Minneapolis. We're going to New Haven. We're going to Los Angeles. I just got off the phone with Alicia Curlin, who is the director of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, their museum, the Barrick Museum. We are going there probably in May. We will probably go to every state as we did before. But I'm going to be 61 in May, and I am tired. So a lot of people have said to me my entire life that artists never retire, but that's not true. We will never retire from our ideas, but our body wants to retire before our ideas, usually. And no one ever told me that when I was going to school or grew up. And Ruby Lerner, who's, like I said, an incredible mentor to me, she said there is no such thing as not retiring. And there is no such thing as retirement. There is the truth that we stay alive. And if you're like de Kooning, and he kept going until the very end, but he had the physical capability of doing so. And in this book, there are people who keep going to the very end. Even Audrey Flack, God bless her, before she passed, was making work all the way up to the end, but her ideas kept going in different forms, through conversations, through writings, through her incredible advocacy, also through her incredible activism. And sometimes the physical part is not catching up with the other parts of us. So in one way, we don't retire in that way from our ideas and speaking out, but our physical part of our bodies, it's natural for us to slow down. So all that to say is I'll probably space this tour out and not go every week like I did before.
Yeah.
But it will be highly publicized. And also, I love to be loud and proud, and no one's going to stop me from sharing what artists need and want. and how important artists are today more than ever.
Agreed. And thank you for sharing that, and for telling us a little bit more about the proposed plans. There will be, of course, plenty of information provided online via the Intellect website and all of our partner websites as soon as things are signed off. But I wanted to ask you about this juxtaposition of creativity and business. And I guess it's something that many artists probably struggle with. And I think it's the general public, one of the misconceptions that, you know, you can't be creative and also be a business person. And again, from Intellect's point of view, you know, we're a commercial business, but we operate ethically. So we almost operate like a non-profit, but at the same time, we aren't a charity. We don't have charitable status. We are a commercial business. So we have to always, you know, marry these two preoccupations, these two commitments to, you know, ethical business, but also to being creative. So this is something that I think speaks well to our community in general. But many artists struggle with this intersection of creativity and business practice. So I was wondering what practical advice perhaps you've encountered in your work that helps artists navigate financial and professional challenges. I assume you believe that artists shouldn't be scared of being business savvy and approach their artistic practice with a business sensibility as well as a creative hat, because otherwise you can't sustain that creativity, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the idea that business and creativity are not connected is very old mythology. If you think about even back in the day, if you think about Gustave Courbet, the amazing artist who actually went to prison, and during his time in prison, and I'm sure some people who identify as art historians will correct me, but let's just go with the story of what I know in my mind. And
I love a good Courbet story. Let's go with it.
Let's go with it. And if somebody can correct me, that's great. But I believe Courbet was an incredibly brilliant person who had a business savvy and started publication. He did other things during his lifetime that were other than just making his work. And again, emphasizing how artists have ideas and we do other things other than just the physical component of making our work, which is incredibly important. And I'm not saying that it isn't important. Of course it is. But sometimes artists are like this old mythology that they're stuck in an attic and only come out when they have an opening, and who feeds them during that time? I don't understand this. Or how are they living? Do they do their laundry? I don't know. But think about it this way, and I always give this example, is that if an artist is in their studios, and let's say they're painting, you know, and they're dressed where they have paint all over them, and they've got paint on their face, and oil paint, which is wonderful media that it actually is wet for a long time, right? So you can actually put your brush down if you need to pause, let's say to use the bathroom or to maybe just think. Well, let's say the phone rings and it's this, here's the phone. Oh my God. It's someone I never thought I would even think of hearing from, a museum curator. Well, first of all, as much as I want to be connected to a museum curator, there's no guarantee that an end result, and I don't believe that using curators, and I don't think artists think this way, but thinking of them as just vehicles for an aspect of, quote, success. And anybody can think about what success is today, but certainly an exhibition is one aspect of an artist's life, and it may not be the end all. And so anyway, I always digress. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much.
That's quite all right. Go for it.
Here's the phone, okay? And I've got my paintbrush there, and there's the phone. I'm like, oh, okay. So I decide to put my paintbrush down because it's a good time for me to do so. And I feel like, okay, my brush is wet. I really want to take this call. I take the call, and I don't get dressed. I don't stop and get dressed in a suit. to take this call. I actually just take the call in my studio. Then after the call, I put the phone down and I go and use my brush again. Does that mean that my person has changed? Probably not. Oftentimes, the creative practice and the quote business practice are infused together naturally, just like they are in a self-employed situation in any field. And so I feel that this idea of quote business in an entrepreneurial bent, if you will, all entrepreneurs are innovators. They are thinkers. They're creative thinkers. Artists are all of that. And we always have been. So I don't understand why it's so separated. Now, one thing though, let's say an artist doesn't want to have anybody disturb them or being even tempted to think about commerce during the time that they're working. Well, artists have the ability and power actually to say, I don't have to answer this. I can separate that out, but we have the ability to do that in advance of whatever we do. And so that's how I feel. And I feel like also if you're in a hurry to take this call when it's not a good time, you've got to ask yourself, why am I in a hurry to take that call? So I'm really adamant about this because I think that so many artists in all of the books really, again, debunk. I don't know why I'm using that word so much today. They go against that mythology that it's actually just seamlessly, and it's in their control as to how they want to have that a part of business, a part of their lives.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And that, I think I wondered where you were going with that, but that's really clarifying, actually. I'm kind of aware of time, so I'm going to jump around a little bit. I wanted to ask you about, no, not at all. I wanted to ask you about women in the arts, though, as we are obviously conducting this interview during Women's History Month. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about representation and visibility, of course. Women have historically been underrepresented in major art institutions, to say the least. What role do projects like your book series play in amplifying women's voices and making their contributions more visible to the wider public?
Well, first of all, I'm a big feminist. So, I mean, I'm a loud, strong woman, loud and clear, and I'm proud of it. And I've been actually tried to be pushed down. I don't like it when people, if I'm talking too loud and they go like this, that's a form of control. There are so many, there's so much misogyny still today. And I believe that people identify as women are still not counted as having the value that we have. Idilise, who is one of two people of the two old bitches, which is the people, her and Joanne, they both, Idilise and Joanne, they are two old bitches, which is an amazing podcast. And I would definitely recommend everybody to hear this podcast. They're hilarious. They wrote the foreword to this book. And is the foreword or introduction? I can't remember. I don't have the book in front of me. I can't tell you.
We can let people investigate it for themselves when they buy a copy. How about that?
Right. They introduced the book in some form. Anyway, I'll never forget Idilise saying this to me. Okay, you're ready for this. She said, when little girls are out there in the world and they're cute and adorable, they're usually coddled and protected. When they become teenagers, when girls become teenagers, they start to become more forced into, let's say, wearing certain things, more protected, more controlled. When a woman is in her childbearing years, she is pushed to control by many different factors, especially in this country, especially. And in other countries, obviously, and where people control women in their childbearing years. After their childbearing years, after menopause, then the women become invisible and not have the validation that they had when they were little girls in different forms. And yet women who people identify as women going through their lives as artists, not only endure that, but they also endure the courage of speaking out and expressing themselves fully in the most intimate way through their work. And this is why I have more women than men in people identify as women than men in my book. I believe that women are the backbone and foundation of who we all are today, even just the physical component of us women having the ability to make babies and to be able to create life physically. And so I just can't say enough about how that is. Now, representation in the art world, we have a long way to go. And I'm going to keep pushing for that. It's gotten a little better, but if you look at anything the Guerrilla Girls, and I highly recommend people on this podcast, listening to this podcast, to be able to look them up, look at their statistics and what they've been saying. And Guerrilla Girls have been right all along. We have a long way to go. So what I would say to people identify as women, you do not need permission. Because the one thing that I have found during these tours, and one reason why I did this book, Over 50, is that constantly I find that women need permission, which is insane. We do not need permission. We have it from ourselves. We do not need permission. We have validation in our community, but we also have the history of all of the women that came before us and the women who've been marginalized that laid the ground for us. And we owe it to them and ourselves to keep going. So I just went on this really big rant.
No.
Filming.
I think many people listening, especially the women in the audience, will probably find that quite validating, actually. So I think that's really important that you kind of share that perspective. But as we're celebrating Women's History Month, I did want to ask you a sort of pretty simple question. Are there any women artists, past or present, who have kind of deeply influenced your work or your perspective? I mean, I know it's almost a mean question because there's probably a litany of them, but are there any examples of women artists who you've personally taken influence from, let's say?
Well, many women in this book, and I immediately, when you said that, and people might say, oh, she's emotional. Good, because I have the freedom and to be able to share my emotions, and it just means that I yield my vulnerability yields my strength. And I say that with all of my ego as factual. But I would say that Audrey Flack, who just recently passed away, she was a major, major badass who gave me a lot of power in the way that I even thought about the world and let alone the art world. I mean, she endured so much. There's a great podcast with Harag and Audrey and myself on Hyperallergic, where, she talks about Jackson Pollock, his hand going up her skirt. And she said, no, and she was fearless. And in her essay, and she's the first person in the essays in the book. And I always have the essays chronological by first name. And because I really believe that the last name first is too formal, and the first name, we always go by our first names and saying hello. And that has to do with community and just feeling very connected in community. But she, right top of mind when you said that, my heart and my back just went up, and she's truly with me every day, honestly. And she lives through me. So there are many, 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 many artists Louise Bourgeois is another one who's a powerhouse, badass. There are just many women who have, and women in other fields, not just people who are creative in different fields, who have sustained their lives, who I would call them artists as well.
And you are yourself, of course, becoming a bit of a matriarch within arts and advocacy. I think that's fair to say. And the baton has been handed down to you in some ways. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask what advice you would give to a young woman artist, or to young women artists, I should say, just beginning their own career and looking to build a sustainable creative practice. So any advice for women specifically embarking on this crazy world of artistic practice?
Well, first of all, I would say thank you for that great compliment. I don't know if I'm worthy to receive that, actually, because I feel like I'm just with everybody else. And also, I'm living what I'm preaching. And I'm an artist who lives a patchwork of life. And I'm still rooting for and struggling to have enough retirement and to have enough to be able to pay for healthcare, to live a sustained life. I rent my apartment. I'm still looking for ways in which to have a solid stability as a human being, but I'm grateful for the privilege of being able to make my work and have the freedom to do so. I would say for young artists, especially who identify as women, look at other women who have struggled far more and who have far less than we do now in our lives. And look at the power and what they have left us. And I just look at even like Cecile Richards from Planned Parenthood. I look at people who are, I just, there's so many of them. And I feel that they have embarked on lives that we can always learn from, and take that with you and really breathe it and know. And it sounds very philosophical, but it's actually practical, because they have lived lives that you can follow, and other artists have. And poets and writers and many scientists, etc.
So let me interrupt you for a second there. With that in mind, now I think it's almost good to go back to that question about creativity and commerce, because whilst looking at these great female artists who've come before you, it's important to understand that perhaps they didn't have a room of one's own, as it were, and that they probably had to really struggle, and that they had to face these issues around business and creativity, and these juxtapositions and this battle. So it's important to also sort of demythologize these people as well, right? And to realize that they were also part of a system and had to play by certain rules or break with those rules. And that, like it's not just, they weren't just breaking in case of creative emergency, they were there living a real life. So I think that's kind of, you kind of married those 2 points together, I think. So I think that's kind of some good advice.
Thank you for saying that. I feel that it comes in small doses. And I'm just looking up here as we're talking, because I don't want to forget certain people. I mean, I know that you had given me that question before, and I can't think about, like, there's just so many. But if people wanted to follow up, I certainly can give some other people that have laid those pathways. But thank you for that. I mean, yes, I think it's a combination of, I think, just small little achievements and small baby steps, rather than taking on big things and losing hope and defeat. Am I making sense there?
Yeah, no, you are. Let's talk a little bit about longevity, though, because that's something I'd like to discuss. A theme, of course, that is important within Last Artist Standing, the forthcoming volume.
Okay.
So your latest book, Last Artist Standing, explores, well, endurance and resilience in artistic careers. What are the key factors that contribute to an artist's ability to sustain a lifelong creative practice? Is there anything different? Is there anything you'd like to reflect upon, or are there any maybe surprising or insightful lessons that you've learned from these women, and from these artists in general within Last Artist Standing? So yeah, let's talk a little bit about resilience and longevity.
Well, and like all of the books, I would say that real estate is extremely important. So when you're younger, if you can get a handle on investing in real estate, you have a great platform and solid foundation for living well, and also living with an asset that can protect you. Pragmatically, the other thing I would say is artists who, as far as longevity, the ones that never think that a rejection is a rejection. I always say a rejection is a difference of opinion. So getting through the sort of, like I was mentioning in the last answer, is there is no defeat. It's maybe, perhaps, if someone says no, I always think, well, no, maybe not now, maybe in the future. The other thing I would say is that those people, longevity, who have worked with other people and have not isolated, they've sustained longer. Those people are open to different ideas, have and taken risks like they do in their studios, in their real life, are the ones that sustain. Meaning that, let's say someone wants to apply for a public art project that may not directly be linked to the media that they've been working in, but the ideas and the values, go for it. Who cares if you don't get that? Apply for everything that fits. Be resilient in not being limited to what, let's say, you were just taught. Oftentimes when people are teaching, and this is for those in academia will not be surprised by this, sometimes somebody can't teach one thing they weren't schooled in, but then they ask to be teaching another class that is, something that is, not that they're schooled in, but also that they've never taught before in their lives. But they learn to teach because they've had that foundation to teach it, and they do it. So I feel like being open to those kinds of opportunities, saying yes, but also saying yes, not just for the reasons of, like, the ideas, the mythology of success. And I put it in big quotes.
Wow.
Success. What is success to you? I guess I would say, for the people listening to this. So I would just say yes to things that perhaps are grounded in your values. I keep coming back to that, but it is a surefire. Your values are not going to let you down. And there are other people who have those values as well. Okay, so now one thing, Mary Oliver and Bell Hooks, those two women have been very, very, very important to me in my life. And they have taught me a lot, especially Bell Hooks, in risk taking, and also what it means to be an educator, what it means to be taught. And Mary Oliver being a woman who is fairly isolated with a partner, and using her poetry to give so much to others, and living on that poetry. So one more thing I would say, I know I'm rambling on, but sustaining a creative life doesn't just mean that you have, you're making a living just by sales, okay? Or you're a success because you sell your work. That's ridiculous, because artists are far more than makers. Artists have ideas, but we're still artists, no matter if we have a job or not, because we carry those ideas with us everywhere. Sales go up and down, and they're never guaranteed. So I feel that, and people might say, oh my God, Sharon, you're a Debbie Downer for saying that. And I would say to you, are you kidding me? That means there's so many other ways to sustain a creative life. And that's what these people in these books share with us.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you about the definition of success, because I believe it often changes throughout an artist's career. So how do the contributors in Last Artist Standing reflect on their journeys, and what do they consider the most meaningful aspects of their careers as they reflect upon this in their book? Because I imagine it isn't all just about sales, it's about other impacts and other things. Are there any anecdotes you could share from the book, or anything that kind of stands out to you?
Well, I can't speak for them about how to define that directly. I can only guess that most of these artists in this book, and I can't say all of them, but I would say majority of them would say just being able to amplify their voices through their work, be able to create freely and create when they want, and to be able to live freely is success. And I believe that too, but I also believe that being in good health and doing that is successful.
I think that's a wonderful answer. And thank you very much for sharing all of this insight around the books, the series, and around living and sustaining a creative life, whether it be in the more traditional arts or in other things like writing and other areas that the series touches upon. But if you'll give me a few more moments, I wanted to ask you a few quick time questions, a few fun little questions.
Oh yeah, you always do this.
So we're gonna delve a little bit deeper into Sharon Louden. Just a few, so if you don't mind. I'm going to ask you one, though, a little bit tricky to start things off with. You're hosting a dinner party, and I know you've got some experience with this, and this dinner party is to celebrate women's achievements. You're allowed 5 guests, and they can be dead or alive. Who's on the guest list? Who you're inviting? And, it could be people you think would interact well together, or it could be just because you want to hear a cacophony of different perspectives or cause an argument. But yeah, who are the 5 women you'd invite to your dinner party?
Well, Mary Oliver, Bell Hooks.
Yeah, good start.
Letitia James.
Okay.
The Attorney General of New York State. Yeah. Badass.
That's
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't think of her name now, but I see her face. She is oh my God, I love her. Jasmine Crockett.
Oh yeah.
I would love her.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
I love
Jasmine
God. Crockett as well.
I think I would get chills sitting next to her. I think I would. I don't know what I would do. I would want Patricia Cronin, Patty Cronin, and Deb Cass there, who are amazing artists and very righteous. And then I would say all of the women all the people identify as women in this last book.
Oh, well, I think that's a great answer. I'm glad you said Jasmine Crockett, because I've been following her religiously.
Love her.
Just basically the battering ram we all need right now. So eloquent, so intelligent, and then obviously also has the right stuff when it comes to dealing with negativity. But you definitely invited a few more than 5. But I think on this occasion we're going to allow that, because that was a great answer.
Hold on, I want it to be a party. So
okay.
We need to have a party. I just have to name a few more names, like from the books: Beth Lippman,
sure.
Ellen Harvey, Jenny Marketew, Julie Langsam, Julie Blackman. Oh my God, Julie Blackman would be amazing. Kate Shepard, Michelle Grabner. This would be the guest list. Austin Thomas, Sharon Butler. I think I would, and even from my second book, there's just so many, like I already mentioned, Andra Zattel. She's incredible. Or Allison Wong. If anybody has never met Allison Wong, you need to go to Wasserman Projects in Detroit and say hello. You'll love her. Kara Ober, Chloe Bass. There's just so many. Faina Lerman, who's pops in Detroit. I know I'm keeping you, but I have to keep going. Julia Coonan, Lenka Clayton, Morshin Alahari. Oh my God, amazing. Shanique Smith and Wendy Red Star. So
Oh yeah.
there's the big party. You know, everybody's there. Oh, and in this last book, you have people. I want Audrey Flack to be there. Audrey Flack's got to be at the head of the table, and she'll in her tiny body and her loud presence, she would make it a party. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. No,
Question?
again, it's this is part of our Women's History Month celebrations, and I think it's great for you to list so many different women. And I think what people should do is they should rewind, re-listen, and then they should go and Google all these people and take a look at their achievements and who they are. And there'll be a pop quiz at some point in the future next time Sharon's on. But you're not getting away from me quite yet. I've got a few more questions. We're gonna. These are probably a little easier, he says. So I wanted to ask you, you've obviously worked in many different fields and you've achieved a lot, but what to you is one of your proudest achievements? I lied, it's a tough question, but you know.
just not, I think, still living, as bleak as that sounds. And
on your own terms, so perhaps? Pardon
me?
Still living, but on your own terms as well, perhaps.
Yes, and persevering past trauma, through trauma and through judgment of others. I think that's my greatest achievement.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I was wondering as well about whether you have any kind of goals that you've set for 2025. Is there anything that you would really like to achieve this year? Is there anything you're really pitching for?
Well, first of all, I live in gratitude. I have gratitude on my, I have a tattoo on my arm. It says gratitude. You can't really see it. So living in gratitude and making sure that I take advantage of the privilege of being around so many gifted people and living in gratitude towards people I love and spending as much time as I can with those people, selfishly or otherwise, but just giving as much as I can during my lifetime and staying as healthy as I can. Those are the biggest goals of my life. I think in all that, in the giving, is creating opportunities for others, but also just like all the other artists that I've mentioned, that I'm assuming they perhaps have a similar goal, is to living freely and breathing freely and expressing ourselves freely and fighting against those who do not believe in that.
Wonderful, Sharon. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think we can all get behind that. We've spoken today a lot about artists, kind of broadly speaking, but I was wondering, I don't know how big a fan of music you are, but I always like to ask people what they're kind of listening to. And I was just wondering, is there anything on the hit list at the moment? It could be a song, an artist, an album. It doesn't have to be current, but like whether it's you're in the studio or you're in the shower, is there anything you've been listening to that you're particularly fond of at present?
Well, my husband and I went to high school together, and we've known each other for over 45 years. And my youngest sister, Jill, who's a hoot, I love her. She's also creative. She makes purses called Switch Purse, and she's just a wonderful person who is a cancer survivor, as am I. And she is a badass. And so we saw and also my Aunt Kathleen, who I dedicate the book to, is one of my very closest relatives, who's a strong badass as well and a cancer survivor. We were watching at my Aunt Kathleen's home with my cousin Danny and his fiance Stacy, a documentary called Yacht Rock. Okay. And I'm dating myself, but ever since then, I can't stop listening to that channel on Sirius XM. And I laugh about it, and it's nostalgic, but I listen to that all the time.
Yacht rock.
Yes.
What kind of rock do you have on a yacht?
It is so funny. It is hysterical. It makes me laugh. Like Doobie Brothers and Kenny Loggins and
yeah.
But I also absolutely love contemporary. I love contemporary rap music, and I also love just all sorts of music. But then I'm also grounded in Bach. I'm very grounded in his music and Chopin. And so when I'm stressed, I listen to them a lot, and my time goes slower. And Bach has a lot of visuals in his music of lines that connecting and also layering, and I see colors, and I float with Chopin. And so I feel that it's just a wide range. But when you ask me now, I just saw this documentary, which I highly recommend, which is hysterical, and especially for those of us over 50.
Wonderful. The soundtrack to the book, Yacht Rock. I love it. Well, we're going to do a playlist to help promote the book, and Sharon, you're going to do this for me, and we're going to include some yacht rock, but we'll accompany it with a little bit of contemporary hip hop and a couple of other things too. Well, look, I've got one more question for you, and then I'll let you get on with your life. It has been such a pleasure having you today, but I do want to ask you.
Thank you.
It's a bit of a serious one. I think it comes at a very, very pertinent moment in human history, in American history, and in our histories. But in a nutshell, why to you is art such a powerful tool for protest and change?
Because it's our truth.
Ooh,
it's a truth.
Answer. Good answer.
It is our truth. It is in us, and it is the most inclusive way to express ourselves, because it's our vocabulary.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end this podcast. It has been my absolute pleasure to have you on the In Conversation podcast today. So Sharon Louden, thank you. And a massive congratulations. I say congratulations because I know you've been going through a lot of ups and downs, turmoil. Like, life has been crazy busy for you for the last few years. And you've still managed to produce not only a trilogy of fantastic books that have been critically well received, and of course have been commercially well received as well, and they're really important for changing the face of arts and how we treat and understand what it is to be an artist, and how we can sustain our practice for those of us who actually operate as artists. So it's been wonderful to host you and to talk about these books, and of course the final book in the series, Last Artist, well, not in the series, the final book in the trilogy, Last Artist Standing, Living and Sustaining a Creative Life Over 50, will be published on April the 21st. But of course, we've just published Artists as Writers, and you already mentioned the Storytellers of Artist History. So there's a number of books in the series, and there'll be a load more coming in the future.
Coming forward. But James, I have to say one thing. I have to thank you and congratulate you and Intellect. This is a partnership. And when I first signed on, and Tim Mitchell, amazing guy, and Holly Rose and Mark Lewis and you, and I just feel that oh my gosh, I'm see, this is my age. The one person who I'm afraid of, who I revere, who's on a pedestal at Intellect. What is her amazing name?
May Yao, I think, maybe.
May Yao. Oh my God, if anybody, please tell May, and anybody who wants to know May, if she loves your book, she blesses you. She's amazing. But everybody at Intellect we congratulate each other. Congratulations for all you've done and putting up with me for those 5 years and understanding and being so graceful. The other thing I would say to everyone here listening, this book is not a moneymaker for us. I split the royalties with all of the contributors. The way that we do sustain a creative life from it is just like musicians. We go on tour. So artists are paid from the minute they leave their house to the minute they get back. And we want access, and we want people to meet us on the tour to create these pragmatic solutions and to sustain all of our lives. So I just had to say that. Thank you very much.
Wonderful way to end the podcast. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for your time today. This has been In Conversation, and we'll see you here next time.
Thank you, James. Bye.